everyone. Welcome back to Brewbound Frontlines, our weekly live stream meetup with beer industry leaders on the moves they're making in this challenging business climate. I'm Jess Infante. Much to the disappointment of both my mom and pineapple enthusiasts everywhere, I am back in Massachusetts. No pineapple wall, but there are some cool German steins and an illustration of the Jersey Devil behind me, so that's pretty sweet. But it's really nice to be back in the same state again as my colleague, Brewbound editor, Justin Kendall, who is hopefully joined by Dusty, his dog, and the unofficial but pretty official Brewbound mascot. Hey, Justin.
What's up? I count me among those disappointed by the lack of pineapples here.
Yeah,
I could use a lot more New Jersey Devils, though.
We'll work on that for next week.
Yeah, please do.
So this week, we're keeping things fresh with a multi-topic panel. Our first guest is the creative force behind Fresh Fest, the nation's first ever beer festival highlighting Black-owned breweries. Fresh Fest normally happens in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but is, of course, all digital this year, so everybody can enjoy it, which is a blessing in disguise. So welcome to Frontlines, Dave Bracey.
Hola. How are y'all doing over there?
Good. Hey, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So after we give everyone the details on Fresh Fest, we're going to get into the ins and outs of running and staffing a taproom. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended on-site service as we know it. So we're checking in with leaders who have had to adapt during this time and who don't use the traditional tipped minimum wage method to pay their staff. So joining us today are Dani Babineau, the CEO of Redemption Rock Brewing in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Adam Delaura, the co-founder of Labyrinth Brewing in Manchester, Connecticut. And last but certainly not least, to help us make sense of all of this, we have Nancy Trigg, who is the president and chief growth officer of Arryved POS. So glad to have all of you guys on board today. Friendly reminder to all of our friends watching at home, if you've got a question for any of our panelists, you can text it to 617-336-8560 and we will get it answered for you. But before we get to today's show, we do have a couple of plugs. So Justin, take it away.
That's right. I'm in the role of pitchman this week. On August 27th, we will be hosting our next Brew Talks virtual meetup. That's going to be presented by Dogfish Head right here, same time, same place. Join us for two big panel discussions featuring Dogfish Head founder Sam Calagione, Russian River's Natalie Choluza, Greenbench Brewing's Chris Johnson, and Hopewell Brewing's Samantha Lee. They're going to talk about the last 6 months of COVID-19, how their businesses survived, and what the path is forward. We're also going to have the leaders of the Brewers Association, the NBWA, and the Beer Institute here to discuss the last few months as well on the governmental affairs end of the spectrum. So a lot of craft beverage modernization and tax reform act talk. So register, I mean, that's the hard sell right there, folks. So register for free on brewbound.com. Next week, right here, 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll be back discussing private equity with the folks from Farley Turner, Arlington Capital Advisors, Cascadia Capital, and Cowen. So you're going to want to check that out. We're going to get into the weeds there on private equity. Finally, Brewbound, not Brew Talks, is moving to a subscription-based model in the very near future, which I'm sure you know about by now because there are pop-up ads on our site and some of you might have trouble closing them. We got that taken care of. We'd like you to join us. Look, the last few months have been really tough on everyone. This pandemic has affected our business as well as yours. In the past, we could provide our daily coverage for free, and that's not the case because our events have been taken away from us by COVID-19. I mean, it makes it impossible to host those. We're doing our best to do those virtually, but it's just not the same situation. So our parent company, Bevnet, has had to make some changes, and we hope you'll come along for the ride. So that's that. Let's get to it, Jess.
Thanks for taking care of all of that. That's a lot of talking. So, Day, Fresh Fest is a lot more than just a beer festival, both in terms of what it represents, but also what it offers. There's so much more going on than just beer. So can you describe it for the audience?
So Fresh Fest is a festival that's focused on promoting, Black brewers in the beer industry, the folks that are currently in it, as well as reaching the Black community and making them aware of the opportunities that are within the brew industry, not just brewing, but all of the things around it. Brewbound, I'm sure, is employed by a lot of people who don't brew beer, but are able to pay a couple of bills as a result of it. So learning that we want to build a festival that allows access, opportunity, representation, a safe space for people to ask questions, as well as uplifting the culture and the arts therein, the music, the food, the visual art, and things of that nature. So we're in our third year promoting that through the industry.
Great. So obviously it's your third year, and I know the past two, if they were any indication, the in-person version this year would have been a huge success. I know Justin and I were both planning on coming to Pittsburgh for it. And I was looking forward to having sandwiches with French fries on them. But unfortunately, the novel coronavirus had other plans. So when did you know that the festival had to go online, and what was going through your mind when that happened?
Our last in-person meeting for Fresh Fest was March. Right at the end of that meeting, we found out that Tom Hanks had the Rona and the NBA was canceled. So at that point, we started to kind of have an idea that this might not be a thing. I'd like to say it was the WHO or the CDC that, alerted us of that, but it was Tom Hanks. Around that point is when we started to kind of dual plan in a sense, like, maybe it's not going to happen, maybe it is. And then it was around, late April was when we decided that we weren't going to have an in-person event. And then it was around mid-May that we decided to actually move forward with a digital event.
So what's the planning process like in shifting gears there? Like, what are all the hurdles that you have to overcome to create an online festival or turn what would have been an in-person festival into an online festival?
First, we had to gauge interest to see if anybody wanted this. And to be honest, we were just going to postpone it. And we got a lot of feedback from the community saying that they wanted something positive to look forward to. They wanted something, an alternative, even if it was digital, a way for the community to come together again this year and to continue the mission. So there was the interest there first. Then we wanted to make sure that we were able to offer a lot of the elements of Fresh Fest at a high quality. Our brand is known for, a certain level of quality for our events. And we didn't want to just do a 9-hour Zoom call or a bunch of, conferences for 9 hours or, just a handheld phone festival, with a bunch of IG, mix-ups and foibles. So we first and foremost, we went to one of our main sponsors, Work Hard Digital, and asked them if this was something that we were able to do affordably. And they came back with some numbers and said, yeah, we could do that. They also developed an app to make it all, streamlined and easy for all the information to be there for folks to understand what we were doing. And then we had to go to brewers to find out if they were capable of brewing beer in a short period of time. We started planning this again in mid-May, and we didn't want to change the date because it seems the later you get into 2020, the more of a shitstorm it becomes. So we were like, let's keep this date and let's see if we can do that. We were lucky enough to have the support from the brewing industry to get the beers brewed in a relatively decent time. And then it was a matter of explaining to people what this festival was. It's new. It hasn't been done before, and it's confusing. Is it all on the app? Is it, are we just going to be watching it on Zoom? Like, how much is it? What is, it's a lot of different questions. And trying to explain to people that the festival and the beer doesn't just come in one neat package when you buy a ticket. You got to kind of work for it a little bit because we're jury rigging a lot of different technologies that weren't available a year ago, and a lot of concepts that weren't available a year ago. Charging for digital content is hard, and most people are used to just getting it for free unless it's a subscription service like Netflix. So, that has been, to be honest, that has been the biggest hurdle, is just trying to explain to the community what it is we're doing, for the $10 that they're paying.
$10 would be a hell of a deal for Fresh Fest and free beers or beers on top of that. So
yeah, Yeah, I got a lot of messages like, "Does that come with the beer?" Like, yeah, we're gonna ship that eight beers to your door for $10. Like, cool. Let's we back to moonshining. So,
Well, let's back it up a little bit. Tell us about some of the collaborations that you guys have been able to put together for this.
Well, you had mentioned Chris down at Green Bench. So Green Bench and 4 Points are going to be teaming up to do a lager. So the way that the idea came from Tom Poet, our head of collaborations, and he wanted to kind of mimic a mix pack that he said Stone was doing a while back, where there were a bunch of different collaborations that you could get just in the same box from different breweries. So we paired 8 local breweries here in Pittsburgh with 8 Black-owned breweries around the country to do collaborations. And the 8-pack features 4 different styles: a hoppy, a lager, a dark, and a sour. So you're really getting that, diversity in the beer. You're getting Black-owned breweries shipped to 25 states, something that hadn't been done before. And we're able to pay the breweries in a difficult time. We're also able to get Black-owned beer shipped to Pittsburgh, which is hard. There's no Black-owned breweries that are up and operating here in Pennsylvania, as well as the rest of the country. So, those are what the 8-pack is. We have Tavor that we paired up with that's going to ship it out to all the folks, at least 25 states. That's half the country. We'll be working on, getting the rest of the country next year. But yeah, it's super excited for some of the collabs that are coming out. The names, all the labels are designed by Black artists. We're paying those Black artists, and if you're interested in Black-owned beer, we got an 8-pack. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around. I don't know too many other packs that you can get 16 actually different breweries in the same pack.
I don't think it exists. So with less than 48 hours to go before the event starts, what's left on your list to do?
Emails, a lot of emails. So just there's some promotion, and just making sure that everybody is in place and knows exactly where they need to be, and what they need to do. There's going to be, I just had a couple of cancellations for music acts. So there's going to be some booking, some, the logistics. Is the beer there? Is it not? So it's just a lot of cleanup and just making sure we're tightening the bolts on this thing so that whenever we do present this, it's the most, streamlined and best product that we could put out. As far as the elements of the festival, they're kind of in place. There's not a whole lot that we can do other than, make sure that everybody's performing and has the knowledge to perform at their highest capabilities.
So there's been a lot of talk this summer about the beer industry's lack of diversity. And you joined us in December at Brewbound Live in Santa Monica to discuss this very topic. And I think the way that you had put it then was so plain and easy for everyone to understand that I actually sent the video of your talk with Justin to a bunch of people and was like, please watch this. This will help you. But do you think that any progress has been made in terms of getting people to recognize that this is a problem?
Yeah, I think once the conversation started to happen, especially on a national level, I don't think that conversation stopped. And more organizations are popping up, and more people are the more people are aware, the more people that we're bringing on to that like that allyship and building those bridges and saying, hey, this is an issue. So there's always progress being made to some degree. It's dope this year. We have Mckenzie Harris, who, Pittsburgh local, who just started brewing beer a couple of years ago, partially because of Fresh Fest, now has a job at a brewery up in Buffalo and is going to be brewing a collaboration beer with Hop Farm here locally. It's changed like that. It's little, but it's changed like that we're looking for. You have J. Nicole Beckham over there with Craft by EDU. You have Garrett Oliver that just launched Michael Jackson Foundation. You have, Trogs working, the Black is Beautiful collaboration that came out that raised some awareness. So, there's definitely, it's an ongoing battle, and it always will be. I know that you guys had mentioned the Brewers Association, and yeah, I mean, there's work to be done with the Brewers Association and the way that they deal with their members based on the issues surrounding race and how they hold their people accountable. In the industry, it's not enough to just throw a couple of dollars around and a couple of black squares and say, we're doing it. You gotta do a little bit more. So definitely some progress, but quite a bit more progress to be made.
Did you feel, you talked about allyship, did you feel that allyship in putting together this year's Fresh Fest?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So shout out to Carmen and PH Experiment. I met them actually out at Brewbound Live in December. She came through and, she really understood. We had a conversation. She really understood our mission and wanted to do what she could with PH Experiment to kind of further that. And the conversation we had was, hey, find somebody in your neighborhood. It's okay if you promote somebody in Pittsburgh, but it's not going to be as fulfilling and long lasting of a relationship as if you find someone in your neighborhood that you can, go across the street and say, hey, what are you guys doing? How can we help? Before, during, and after the festival. So they hooked up with Exit the Maze, and they brewed a kombucha. And when the COVID hit, we lost a lot of sponsorship. A lot of people kind of dried up, for good reason. A lot of marketing and advertising budgets got slashed greatly. So, PH Experiment and Carmen were a couple of the few folks that were just like, you know what, that's cool. We're in a place that we can continue with our collaboration because we're not just doing it for the festival. We're doing it because we believe in the cause, truly. So they continue with their collaboration. They continue with their sponsorship. And they were just like, it doesn't matter what you guys do. We're going to continue to put the work in, at least on our end. And if we can help you guys out in any way, we're here. So definitely, a strong allyship out there from PH Experiment, but also, a lot of the sponsors, both monetarily and in kind, locally and nationally. Allagash hooked up with Urban Roots. Again, they continued their collaboration even through the COVID, despite whether, Fresh Fest is going to happen or not. And, just a lot of people reaching out, especially after, the tragic murder of Mr. Floyd. And it's one of those things that, we're always here doing the work, and we're always going to be here doing the work. We were doing the work beforehand. We as Black people don't have the luxury of kind of like not being aware or just kind of coming on to it whenever it's popular to do so. So, but what we're able to do is whenever you do become aware, we're here and we're ready to guide you on, all right, when people come in and they wake up and they go, you know what, I probably haven't been doing enough. How can I do more? We're here. Garrett Oliver is there. Craft IEDU is there. Brewing Change out in Minnesota is there, and they always have been there, and they will be there. After when the news cycle moves on to the next hot topic button, button topic. Whenever the shitstorm of the elections come around in November, we're still going to be doing that work. And the work that we do here isn't in a bubble. It's not in a vacuum. When we are empowering the Black community, we're empowering the Black community to do more than just, brew beer or, find, upliftment in the craft beer industry. We start to raise awareness, in all the other industries as well, and all the other aspects of life, and, allow people to say, hey, if they're doing that over there, why aren't we doing this here in the tech industry? Or why aren't we doing this here, in the clothing industry, or whatever else? So, that's what, the allyship definitely is there. It's grown, and, hopefully it continues to do so.
What's the sense that you're getting locally as far as support goes?
I mean, so it's tough. Everybody, COVID happened, but Pittsburgh, it's one of those things that everybody's struggling. So everybody's just trying to figure out what they can do. But once we announced that we were doing this festival, we got a lot of support from folks that were just like, I don't even know if there's another beer festival happening in Pittsburgh. I don't know how many beer festivals are happening in a virtual setting in America. But the industry here locally really did say, hey, we need this. This is something that this mission didn't stop because the pandemic happened, and they see the value in it. And Pittsburgh, really has saw the value in what we're doing, for the industry. They understand that they can't continue to be as homogeneous in their in their employment, and their guests, in their thinking. So yeah, we've definitely got a lot of support here locally. There's always work to be done, but focusing on the positive, especially through a pandemic. I didn't know if anybody was going to be able to do anything, and once we announced this, people just hopped on and said, "Hey, I got some free time, and I got some resources and some skills and some knowledge. How can we offer that to you in order to move forward?" So yeah, the support has definitely grown over the years.
What do you think the future of Fresh Fest looks like? Will we I mean, like, if we can all be together again next year, what do you think the event will look like?
So we have plans moving into the future to we're always going to be here in Pittsburgh here in August, but we definitely want to move the festival outside the city, earlier in the year, later in the year, around the country, around the planet. There's Black people all across the planet that can find opportunity in the beer industry. So we definitely want to travel, but coming back into it, I'm not. We'll find another venue. We'll find it'll change. How it changes is going to be weird because we don't know. That's how the fest evolves. Like, how we looked at this festival, even in the middle of May, is completely different to what it is now because of the input of the community. So it's going to be different next year, but we will have that digital component to it. We're super excited that we're able to offer this festival to people all across the world, so they can have that access to the speakers, to the looking at the beers that are being brewed, how they're being brewed, the music that's there, the art, the food. We want to expose people to this industry, and being that we have now built a digital component to that, we can come back live and also continue to push that out to potentially 7 billion people. And that's what I'm super excited for that. The digital portion of this isn't going anywhere. It's just going to enhance the in-person. So if you can't afford to buy a ticket to Pittsburgh or whatever city we happen to go to next year, it's okay. $10 and an internet connection, and you're there live. So super excited for the potential of that, because right now it's just what we're able to do in 2.5 months. I can't imagine what we can do with a year worth of planning moving forward. So excited.
Awesome. Well, Dave, we know you have so much to do because it's Fest Week. So why don't you give everybody a quick plug on where let everyone know where they can buy their tickets, and then we'll thank you for your time. But
so Fresh Fest, Digifest, DIGIFest.com. Please download the app. The app is free. Get a look at the artists that we have, the collabs that we have. There's a Black-owned brew directory that's there. So all of the 65 breweries that are here in the country are listed on that app. We have small business workshops, giveaways, and all types of, we have speaker profiles and everything else on the app. And again, freshfestdigifest.com. If you get the app, you can, find out how to buy tickets and how to buy beer, and how to support Black artists, entrepreneurs, and breweries in the country. So freshfestdigifest.com. Perfect.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us. I know how busy you are this week. I'm so looking forward to Saturday. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you. I'm gonna go put out some dumpster fires.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so huge thanks to Dave for joining us. I know he's really busy this week, but we have the rest of our panel, Adam, Dani, and Nancy, and we're going to shift gears quite a bit. So the pandemic has affected the entire economy, but the hospitality industry has been particularly decimated. So traditionally, bar and restaurant employees are paid a lower hourly rate and make the bulk of their income through tips. But in a world in which, taproom, bar, restaurant capacity is slashed, and many consumers are still staying home, tips are really hard to predict. Our guests, Adam and Dani, both use very different methods at their tap rooms. So Adam, why don't you explain Labyrinth's wage system to the audience?
Sure, absolutely. So our front of house staff, even prior to COVID, they start off at $1 above minimum wage, which is a lot more than what you'd expect to make in a traditional bar or restaurant or whatnot. In addition, the front of house staff split all the tips. So whatever they earn out there, they collect. And to go one step further, because it's really important for us as owners of a business to treat our employees as valuable human beings. We also offer anybody who works 30 or more hours a week has access or the ability to join our health insurance plan. So that's vision, dental, health, etc. So.
Cool. And then Adam, you're in Connecticut, so minimum wage is a little different there than where it is everywhere else. So what does that rate come out to per hour?
Yeah, so currently the Connecticut minimum is 11. So, if you start off as a brand new beer tender, beer wizard, as we call them, it's $12 an hour.
What a great title.
Well, we work a lot of magic, so.
Dani, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Redemption Rock does? Because I know it's very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just opened about 1.5 years ago, and we decided when we opened that none of us as owners, there's 4 of us, and none of us wanted to do a tipped model at all. Some of us have worked in the industry. We've all obviously been customers in the industry and have traveled to plenty of places where they don't do tips for the service industry. And so the way that we built our model was really based on the way that salaries work in pretty much, most other industries, where everybody on our staff is pretty much on salary. For taproom hours, if you're over 40 hours a week in the taproom, you still get overtime for that. But for pretty much everybody gets the same base pay rate every week. And so it's basically just based on kind of where you are in the company, whether you're at an entry level kind of taproom position or kind of as you move up through leadership, which is so far, we basically only have 2 tiers, which is like leadership and then taproom employees, because we're a small staff as well. But yeah, so everybody gets paid, the way that you would if you worked, in an office. And so we don't rely on our customers to pay our employees. We pay them ourselves, and then all the revenue from it goes into the company, which we then make payroll with. And then also, because people are very uncomfortable with not tipping in the service industry, we do accept cash tips, and we donate them to a different nonprofit every month. So we kind of go through as a staff, and we choose what nonprofits we want to work with each month. We set our agenda for the year of what every nonprofit's going to be, so we can give them a heads up. And last year in 2019, we raised just over $35,000 for local nonprofits in our community.
Wow, that's so great.
Yeah.
So Dani, it sounds like Redemption Rock started out with this model, but Adam, was Labyrinth set up this way from the start too?
Yeah, absolutely. When myself and my business partners got together and we were trying to decide what the pay structure was going to be, we have all, fortunately or unfortunately, experienced really terrible working conditions. And so one of the big things for us was to, again, treat our employees like they are valuable human beings, which they are, and also compensate them for the work they do. Because at the end of the day, the labor that my employees produce, that adds value to the company that I own. So I kind of have an ethical and a moral obligation to compensate them for working so hard to increase, something that's valuable to me.
Nancy, we want to get you involved here. You've been waiting patiently. Give us a high-level overview of what you're seeing across the country.
Sorry, in terms to what specifically?
How common is it for tap rooms to not collect tips? I should have finished the second part there.
That's okay. Yeah. Honestly, I would say that it's still fairly typical that most are collecting tips. That's what we're seeing across the board. There are a few exceptions in our customer portfolio. But how people utilize those tips is what seems to be changing the most. Who all is included in, sort of tipping pools, how tipping pools are disseminated, things like that seems to be changing, and people seem to be experimenting quite a bit more. with how to keep everyone paid and sharing in the tips so that all employees are participating.
Tipping is so ingrained in the American culture that it's common for people to do it whether you used a tip system or not. Dani, what's the reaction of Redemption Rock customers when they find out that you donate all the tips to charity?
It ranges from like slight confusion to absolute shock and awe to people who literally have come in because we've had a fair amount of press about it, and so people that come in because of that and want to support that, or they want to support the nonprofit that we are supporting that month. But yeah, no, it's definitely something that we have to train our customers on. And so normally we have a counter service model. So typically the reaction is someone's closing out their check and they're like, but how do I leave a tip? And we explain, we only do cash tips because we donate everything. And there's definitely like a little bit where we have to usually explain ourselves a couple of times. And a lot of times customers will be like, I remember one of our employees like had to sit a guy down and explain it because he was like, that's not right. That's not okay that you guys can't have tips. And she's like, no, like we don't get tips because we get paid a salary. Like it's not that they're keeping our tips. So there's definitely a good amount of like customer training that we have to do. And then there's like people who've worked in the industry who have come in and like been like close to tears that somebody is doing something differently that they would have liked to experience as well. So it's definitely, the tipping system is it's a weirdly emotionally charged issue. And there's like there's some background in there too that is part of the reasoning why we wanted to get away from it too, because there's, you know, some of those emotions have to do with complicated social structures around race and gender and kind of power structures as well, which I feel like is probably a little deep for this conversation, but all of that kind of fed into our discomfort with the tip system.
Now, Nancy, I know you have a lot of exposure to all sorts of different models. So, I mean, do you hear about like what the pros and cons of tipped and not tipped models are? Is that something that your clients often discuss with you guys?
Yeah, it is. And honestly, it kind of depends on where the staff comes from, right? In places where you've got staff that is predominantly coming from the more traditional restaurant industry, there's a much higher attachment level to those tips and that sort of way of working, you know, sort of controlling your own destiny, I guess, in terms of your own income. Folks that are coming either new into the industry or coming from the beverage industry seem to be much more embracing, excited, and enthusiastic about tip pooling methods, or even the methods that Adam and Dani are talking about, the sort of non-traditional, non-tipped method. So it kind of depends on where you are. It also depends on where in the country you are. The age of your staff really does tend to affect that, right? What people are used to and how attached to those older models they are. But there's definitely it feels like this is a conversation that is constantly evolving. Almost every conversation we have with a customer that's onboarding with our system starts with, what are our options and how creative can we be about how we share, pool, or manage tips.
Interesting. What kind of creativity do you see in the share, pooling, and management? Because that's different. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people being included in tips that previously were not, right? In establishments where, maybe at a tap room, you have someone that's either running or hosting that's not actually a beer tender or server, making sure those people are participating. We've seen a few places that even include some of their production folks in tip pooling in states where that's allowed. That's not allowed everywhere, but so that, they can keep the wages fair amongst, true back of shop and front of shop wages. And we see all kinds of things. We see people who completely exclude anyone in a leadership role, even if they're working as a bartender, because those salaries are higher. So there's just a lot of flexibility and a lot of people trying to be creative. And definitely we are seeing a few more of the folks that are trying to do donations either instead of or in addition to their traditional tipping. So adding tips for the local nonprofits and things like that.
Makes a ton of sense. So if you are watching at home and you have a question for any of our panelists, please feel free to shoot a text to 617-336-8560. So Nancy, I know one of the things that you and I talked a little bit about what the platform can do is kind of manage tips and tip distribution. So how much work goes into tip distribution on management's end? How time consuming is that?
Oh goodness. Well, if you don't have, I mean, honestly, if you don't have a lot of good data coming out of your system, it can be quite cumbersome trying to figure out who worked which hours, how tips should be allocated based on seniority or how, whatever policies you have in place. Some people like to break up tips by shift. Some like to break them up by hour. And obviously you can imagine when you've got, 4 or 5 people working and different variable rates and tipping, that just the math and the management of that can get quite hard if you don't have sort of pre-configured tools that do that for you. I mean, I would say, on average, a couple hours a day that people are putting into, that larger companies are putting into managing their tips, which is kind of crazy.
Adam, I want to bring you back in here. What kind of tap room does a non-tip model work best for?
A non-tip model?
Yeah.
That would be hard to say. I mean, it's not something that I've experienced. The staff splits tips. Excuse me. You'd think I had started drinking already, but that's not the case. My staff, splits the tips evenly based on hours worked, regardless of what level of staff they are. And, that works well for us, and everybody seems to be okay with that. We haven't even thought to have the discussion to explore another option, to go non-tip or whatnot. So.
Dani, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, we kind of just try to design our tap room in a way that would work. And I guess now COVID has, at least from an operational standpoint, COVID has forced us to try another model because now we have to do table service where we are. And honestly, like we've been able to switch to from counter service to table service without having to hire any additional staff. We have a very small staff. There's 6 of us total, including our brewer. And so for us, what's worked really well is just giving kind of it's more of our staff management, I think, than our taproom model, in that we really kind of trust all of our staff to really take on the responsibility of every transaction with a customer, and the success of the business in general. Everybody's kind of empowered to really learn all the insides and outs of the business, to question everything that we do. We're very transparent. We do staff weekly meetings with everyone. We're a completely open book. Everybody understands like what our payroll is every month. And I think that transparency and that really putting a lot of responsibility and empowerment into our staff's hands allows us to be able to operate with a higher payroll cost because we operate pretty efficiently. We ask kind of a lot out of our staff and ourselves, but we're able to do that, partially because everybody really believes in what we're doing and our mission, and because people feel like they're being compensated fairly. So, I mean, as far as the operations go, I think both counter service and table service, it has worked fine. Like I said, customer training. With the table service, it's a little bit more weird because we're like not bringing them checks. We're just using a tablet to cash people out, and people will still just leave money on the table. And so like, it's a little bit more like we have to be proactive in explaining where their money's going. But it's worked equally well. And I think that if you believe in it enough, you can adapt to it.
Great. Adam, can you tell us how the pandemic has affected your team? Because I know when you and I caught up, you guys had changed some operations. So what was it like for the team when you transitioned to start opening up for curbside pickup a few months ago? How did that change go?
Yeah, well, it was challenging. I'm sure everyone else in the industry can agree with that. So, we went from having a hustling, bustling, tap room. We've got a large space. Occupancy is about 175, shoulder to shoulder on a Friday night. It gets crazy, and that's a good thing. To like crickets in the tap room, nothing. So we quickly shifted to curbside pickup, which obviously doesn't require all of the humans I had employed prior. So we, made a decision to lay everybody off immediately so they could collect whatever benefits they were done. And then we basically pooled all the tips that we collected for curbside pickup while myself and the other two owners worked curbside, brewed all the beer. And we used that tip money, for example, for a few things to help the staff out, but to keep them on the insurance. Because obviously you don't want to lose your health insurance because you lost your job because there's a global pandemic that shut your job down. Like, that's just not a thing. So, but once we were able to get the okay to reopen with all the CDC guidelines and the masks and the gloves and the distancing and whatnot, we were able to bring everybody back again. And whatever remaining balance we had of those tips that we had collected, we dispersed out to them all as a bonus. Which was awesome for them. They really appreciated that. And we actually were able to hire another additional person because I don't want to say we're busy, but we're definitely steady. So, and we're also trying to make some adjustments in our staffing because there are people who are home with children, people who are homeschooling and that kind of stuff. So the staff just have things going on in their personal life. So we're just adjusting our operation around them so that they can still have that work-life balance and not have to dread coming to work every day. So.
That's great. When were you allowed to reopen?
I want to say sometime in the end of May, we opened up a temporary outdoor seating area. And then sometime mid-June, we were able to have the tap room back open again. Again, the tap room is probably about a third of the occupancy we normally had. And that's if everybody shows up in the right group of 4 or 5 people and sits in the right tables and all that stuff. So, essentially we're operating maybe a little less than a half occupancy if you count the outdoor seating and the indoor seating. So,
Dani, how is reopening? Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, I was going to say, how long is that sustainable for you?
That's a good question. One of the fortunate things that we have is that we do a lot of distribution as well. So a lot of our beer is canned or kegged and put off out into bars and restaurants. So we're in a fortunate position where as the tap room kind of dwindles down because of restrictions, liquor stores are still open in the state. So their sales are increasing as people are staying home and, not venturing out to a bar or restaurant. So we're able to sort of switch production on the factory end of things and package things in cans and send them out. So right now we're kind of holding our own. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but right now we're treading water and we're doing okay. So I can't complain.
Were you able to obtain PPP money?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We applied for everything possible with the idea that let's apply for everything, see what the details are, and then make an educated decision as to, yeah, sure, we'll take this. No, we're not taking that. Yes, this is how we can use it. So, we are nothing if not tenacious, and we're not going to let this put us under. So.
Dani, did you also receive PPP money, and how sustainable is the current operating environment for your business?
Yeah, we received our PPP money in April. We also got a small grant from our city. And then we also in June, right when our PPP money was running out, we also got the EIDL loan as well. And all of that has been a huge help. And really, actually, I know there's been a lot of frustrations with both for good reasons, but for what we do in our model, it helped us a ton and worked really well for us. The PPP, even the initial 75% needs to go to payroll. That was perfect for what we needed for payroll for 8 weeks. And then the rest went to a month of rent and a health insurance payment. So that was hugely helpful for us to get through April, May, and June. And then we were able to reopen again the end of June. Inside, we got kind of lucky on the restrictions, the way that they're set up in Massachusetts, and that it's there's no capacity restrictions. It's about how much your tables are spread out. And so we kind of have a big space anyway, with a lot of flex space and standing space and playing game space. So we eliminated all of that standing and kind of flexible space and just spread our tables out a little bit more. And we only lost the bar seating and one big table. And we're working on adding some additional outdoor seating. We have a little bit right now, but not a lot. So we just finished our first full month of being open again. And we were fairly close to our revenue number for last July. The difference being that last July it was 100% draft. And then we just started canning with a mobile canner in November. So this year it's been significantly more packaged product, and we also just started, we increased our wholesaling again, including signing having a distribution agreement with Night Shift. So it's definitely a different cost structure, but where we are right now, like, this is sustainable as long as we stay kind of in this zone. My biggest fear right now is stuff's going backwards and having to shut back down, which is still just a day-to-day watching everything and having anxiety about that.
Definitely. I feel like we are certainly looking at another round of shutdowns potentially, but great audience question that just came through. Nancy, I definitely think this is right in your wheelhouse. Question from friend of Brewbound, American Cider Association Executive Director, Michelle McGrath. Hey, Michelle. Michelle's got a great question. Is there a correlation to lower staff turnover and higher staff satisfaction in tipless models? Nancy, what are you seeing from out in the world?
Well, again, we're not seeing a lot of tipless models. I'm just, it's just not a trend yet. It could be, but we're not seeing that as a trend yet. Obviously, there is better staff satisfaction levels in places that can and are able to make, pay higher wages. When it comes to the sort of changes that we're seeing on that front, though, in the pandemic, is that people are starting to pay a lot more attention to that kind of hourly efficiency gap, and what is our percentage of output and our cost in staffing compared to our intake in revenue. So looking at that a lot tighter, and making sure that they're staffing in a way that their staff is continuing, the staff that is working is continuing to make a good, if not better, wage. So really kind of honing in on when bringing staff back is the most profitable, right? So we're seeing a lot of people working shorter hours, or a lot of companies going to shorter hours, maybe opening 4 nights a week instead of 5, something like that, so that they can really run an efficient and profitable both for them and for their staff, kind of a staffing experience.
What kinds of questions are you guys hearing? What's on everyone's minds when it comes to staffing?
Staffing efficiency. I mean, that's kind of the buzzword of the day, I would say. Like, people are really trying to understand when that spend is worth it, right? I think a few people have mentioned, making sure that it's kind of worth it to be open, and making sure it's, what days, what times, things like that make it. Also knowing how using that staff is efficient, right? So they're experimenting a lot with, should we try having a runner on all the time so that there's someone who's just running beer and our staff that's on the floor is on the floor? They're trying to figure out exposure even. So is it better to have 5 people that work together all the time and another group of 5 people that work together all the time, so that that staff is limited in exposure if something were to happen, that they have another group of staff to pull back? So I would just say a lot more creativity around how they manage it, and a lot more looking at the numbers to make sure it's making sense.
So what is the sweet spot for your respective businesses on staffing efficiency? And I'll start with Adam.
Well, I mean, it really depends on which night of the week it is, right? But essentially for us, we look to see what is the minimum number of humans we can employ, right? From a business perspective, I don't want to just have everybody in there, but I also don't want to make my employees' lives miserable. So it's usually like, what's the minimum plus one? And if I get enough customers, whether that's through curbside pickup or that's coming into the patio or whatever, then that makes it worth it. In the past, I had historic data to look back at. Now with COVID-19, who knows who's coming out when, where, whatever, so I mean, it only takes one news article to make everybody stay home and say, you know what, I'm going to skip going out this weekend. So, but I mean, for us in general, like on an average night that's not too busy, not too slow, we usually have 3 staff on, and we have sort of like evaluated the hours that we're open so that we can do it all in one shift and not do so many split shifts, because then that requires fewer people, to cover breaks and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
How about you, Dani? How are you guys achieving staff efficiency?
I mean, it's actually not that different to pre-COVID. Like I said, we run a really lean, efficient staff. So we have, so we're open 7 days a week. We're open 12 to 8, Sunday through Tuesday, and then basically like 11 to either 10 or 11, Wednesday through Saturday. And so Saturdays, Sunday afternoon, and Friday nights, we have 3 people on. The rest of the time, we have 2 people on. We started, I mean, running that with counter service is pretty easy. Table service, we basically gave it a shot, and then we were all like, all the owners just gonna be here and back up to see like if you guys need it, and it's worked out. We basically, I mean, and we have our tap room is technically 150 capacity. With the just seated service, we're running at about like 85 right now. And so 3 people can handle that with every table full. And it's worked out pretty well. And everybody kind of I think it helps that we're now a year and a half into this, and everybody's pretty good at their job and pretty used to working a busy tap room. But yeah, I mean, between the 6 of us, everybody's working taproom shifts, including myself 3 days a week. Our GM, our head of marketing, who's also been running wholesales and working the taproom 3 or 4 days a week. And then our brewer is the only person after COVID, we kind of moved out of the taproom. So he like backs us up on Sundays if we need him. But for the most part, we've tried to keep him out of the taproom post-COVID.
So it sounds like things are, definitely changing and probably a little bit stressful. What do you guys do to keep your staff's morale up? Adam, what do you guys do at Labyrinth to make sure everybody is on the same page and motivated?
That's interesting. There have been a lot more basically just like checkups that I do on the staff. We just had a storm come through here. Any of you in Massachusetts probably experienced it too. So I actually had a tree fall in my dining room. It didn't hurt anything, but it landed with a thud, and I thought I was going to need a new dining room. But it's basic things like checking in on my staff, making sure they're okay, being a little flexible if they need some time off, they need some flex time to pick up a kid from daycare or whatever it is. And just basically, we do a lot more making sure they are okay, and not just, hey, do you feel well? More like, hey, how are you feeling inside? Do you need a hug? Not that we're hugging because it's COVID, so we'll just jazz hands from a distance, but we're just trying to keep a pulse. We're a really small staff, so we're kind of like a really weird family. So, it's just a matter of making sure that everybody is ready to come to work. And if they need anything additional, or if they need an extra break or whatever it is, taking care of that, so that the general stress of living life during a pandemic isn't also added to the stress of our tap room's busy and there's, a lot of people out on the patio, et cetera. So again, it goes back to us just trying to treat everybody in our space as just a human being that deserves understanding and whatnot. I feel like I should do the character stare now.
I feel like we should do a jazz hands fake hug.
Yeah, something. I don't know.
Dani, what do you guys do at Redemption Rock to keep staff morale up?
I second everything that Adam said. I think having open communication is my favorite thing. And we've always done weekly formal meetings every Wednesday morning for an hour and a half. We kind of review the last week, but we're also able to kind of check in with everybody as far as, what's going on just personally for the week, and going through like any issues that people have, whether it's a taproom thing or personal stuff, or it's kind of just like our airing of grievances, and also just problem solving session. That we all sit down and kind of listen to each other and figure out, what needs to be taken care of. And we always try and end on a positive note. We do like shout outs for customers and team members, of people that have just like, did something awesome that week. Also, we're a very dog friendly tap room. When we've happened since like last summer, and we leaned into it hard. We did like a whole dog calendar thing last year. And honestly, I feel like just having our regular dogs back in and then meeting new dogs ends up just being like it is so brightening and brings so much joy into the tap room, just having like a puppy hanging out and like playing on the couch and stuff. So I think having dogs in the tap room a lot has definitely been good for everybody's morale.
I bet. So for brewery owners out there who are considering implementing these types of models, what do they need to know? Adam, let's start with you.
I mean, for us, I mean, I'd say if you're going to, you need to be okay with having a higher number on the balance sheet for wages, for staff time, you know. But I would caution anybody who looks at that and says, "Oh gosh, we got to keep those numbers low," because my staff is awesome, and I would bet they're probably better than a lot of other staffs. And I don't mean to brag about them, but we have had zero staff turnover with the exception of one human who left to pursue other things in life. But everybody from the day we opened is still employed with us. And so I think just treating your staff well and paying them well, regardless of whether it's a tip model like we do where they keep the tips, or Dani's model where they're donating it. I think the base is that the staff is compensated well and valued and treated like human beings. And so, you can't just give them more money and treat them like garbage. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So I would just say that don't worry about what the numbers look like. I mean, treat your staff well, train them well, give them the tools, respect them, and you will get tenfold returns, from customer feedback, customers returning. Again, if I'm out in the tap room, something crazy is going on, but my staff's out there all the time, and that's why my regulars are coming back. They want to see them, not so much of me, which I understand. But it's them. They're the ones increasing the value of my brand. So, I mean, yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Great. Dani, it looks like you agree. Anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, I echo a lot of that, in that you really have to look at it holistically. And it's not just about one number. You have to see what goes into that number. Our staff are very similar turnover. We've had one person leave, and that was to do a total career change. And we're really building something from the ground up. And also, we have so many of our customers who, like, everybody talks about the awesome vibe in our tap room, and it's their favorite place. And a big part of that is the staffing. And that's our staff that's doing that, and bringing those people in and making people who are like hardcore fans of ours. And that comes from those staff interactions. And I think that you don't get that from a bottom line.
Nancy, you're in a tech world that mixes with the beer industry here. And so much of what's been built in the beer industry has been, through loyal workers at these tap rooms who are, building customer bases. But we're in a moment where COVID-19 has taken a lot away from us, and it's led to a consumer base that is looking for more options that are contactless and touch-free. How do you see the intersection of tech and I guess innovation within the brewery and also hospitality colliding here?
That's probably my favorite question, because I think most people would expect that I would say something about tech replacing humans. No way, right? The technology is a tool to make your service experience shine, to make your guest experience excellent. And it should never be used, ever, to replace quality service. And I think, the value of kind of investing in things like touch-free is about making your guests feel comfortable, right? If your guests want a touch-free experience, then provide that for them, right? If what matters more to your guests is, having that extra space so that they feel comfortable, and you can only, kind of do one or the other, go that way, right? So really listen to what your guests are saying, the questions they're asking, and then use the technology to support that. Don't let this technology sort of drive what you do. Another little piece I would add to that is I'm seeing right now a lot of people, and I understand it. We're in this boat too, of kind of trying to just hang on and get through this. And I think sometimes when that happens, you have a tendency to just reach out and grab for things like, oh, there's a tool over here that can do that, or a tool over here that can do that. And people are making changes a little quicker than they understand. So I do also say it's a good idea to really think about, what is the guest experience I want to provide first? Like, what is the experience I want my guests to have in my tap room on Monday when we open back up? And then what are the tools that can help support that? So just be really intentional in how and why you choose the technology that supports your experience.
So I think this question is a good one for all three of you. How do you see taproom service evolving as new innovations come through it? Nancy, let's start with you since you're the expert. How can taproom service evolve?
I think the ideal should be using the interaction between the staff and the guest to improve that experience and enhance that experience. So just as an example, right, a lot of folks are moving towards kind of the floating service model where their staff is getting out from behind the bar. And when they're out from behind the bar, they're engaging with their guests, they're upselling new product, they're educating their guests and expanding their palettes. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that, right? Like we can all get good beer at home, like we can. And the reason that we go out is because we want that experience, we want that education, we want that to all be enhanced. And again, the technology is there to support that. And I think, as technology providers are paying attention to what's happening in this industry, the tools should adapt and support that.
Adam, how do you see taproom service at Labyrinth evolving with different innovations coming down the line?
I think Nancy hit the nail on the head when she said that the technology is going to be helpful and not going to replace that. I mean, even once our tap room shut down, we still did events like we normally would, except they were digital. We did happy hours online, so people would curbside pick up and buy beer and go home and drink it because that's what we could do. So sure, the technology was there to stream like we're doing here, and we can talk about the flavor profile of the beer and the process and all that other stuff, and that's great. But it still came down to the human beings on the other side of the camera in this instance, making that connection to your customers. I don't think that's ever going away, right? Like having that human to human contact, because again, as Nancy said, you can get good beer. Go to the liquor store, buy good beer, sit at home and drink it. Like, I'm glad you want to come to my tap room because my beer is great. But at the end of the day, you can just buy it at the package store. Why do you come in? You come in to interact with the staff, to do an activity, to have some sort of meaningful human bond with another person. Technology can enhance that, but it's never going to replace it. Like we're never going to have robot servers. And if we do, please just fire me. So.
Dani, will Redemption Rock ever have robot servers?
No. We actually, so even like we had looked at like the model where you put the like QR code on the table and people scan that and put it, and we ultimately decided to not do that. We have like a flag system where you put the flag up when you're ready to order, because honestly, so much of our relationships with our customers is based on those conversations. And we have a lot of people who aren't big beer drinkers, but they come in because they've heard our tap room's cool. And so they want to a little bit of help, or they just want to say hi and ask how we're doing. So we decided we would do a table model with staff getting out, but still, make it so that people didn't have to constantly go check on everybody. But I think I wholeheartedly agree that I think that human element is really necessary. But I think also back to like what Day was saying about the future of Fresh Fest, and that, the pandemic and this use of technology has forced us to rethink things. And some effects have been bad and some effects have been good. And one of the good effects is that it forced us to learn tools like Zoom and ways to amplify our messages, and have these conversations and these collaborations and reach bigger audiences in ways that can really enhance the experience rather than replacing any piece of it.
It's a perfect place to leave it. We are out of time. We've actually gone over time. Thank you guys all so much. Really appreciate all your time because we know that you're super busy. But Justin, why don't you take us home?
Yep, we'll be right here next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, discussing private equity. We'll have the folks from Farley Turner, Arlington Capital Advisors, Cascadia Capital, and Cowan, 3 p.m. Eastern. Be here. Also, Brew Talks, August 27th, also in this space. Register for free at brewbound.com. Until then, we'll see you next week.